Welcome back to Charge. Today I'm in the studio with my colleague Louisa Crowder.
Hello.
And Anisah Osman Britton.
Hiya.
Thank you so much for joining us, Anisah. Anisah is the CEO and founder of 23 Code Street, a coding school for women. So, Anisah, can you tell us a little bit about your background and sort of how you got to 23 Code Street?
Sure. I left college at 18 and decided that instead of going to university, I was going to do internships with companies kind of around the world. It was an excuse to go on a gap year, but actually do something useful and learn something because I wanted to start a company of some description. At this point, didn't know what technology was or code was. And I started this little company at the time with a guy who was a developer, and he ended up kind of ruining it all. And I realised I needed to learn how to code so I could do it myself. Yeah, that's kind of how I got into the technical side of things. And I then went and worked at a big corporate accelerator called The Bakery, where I was the first employee. And they were great in so much as they allowed me to go on training to learn some more development skills. They very much allowed me to do some of the technical side of like white labeling some of the companies we were working with, which was really, really fun. And the big problem I had though was that all the companies we worked with, all the technical team were always men. And actually all the leaders were always men. And I just felt it was necessary to have more women in the room who could be decision makers and technical so that they had the idea of both, which is how 23 Code Street came about.
Where did the idea of a coding school come about? Like, what inspired that specific venture? Because obviously, from the problem that you saw, you could have gone and done coaching, you could have done a variety of things, but you decided to teach code to women.
It's a good question, and one I've been thinking about a lot recently, because I think a lot of it stemmed from my disappointment in the education at that time and the courses that I did, in so much as I didn't feel like I belonged. I didn't feel like the culture in the schools that I attended was geared towards me, and I also felt very forced to become a developer. And I actually never wanted to become a developer. I wanted to become an operations/business person with technical understanding and skills to be part of leadership teams. That was always, I guess, my goal, that I could use code and other stuff to build companies. It was never to be the developer in the team. And I just realized that there were other people who felt like me, who were decision makers in companies, who were designers, who were operations, product people, who didn't have any other knowledge of how things worked. Mm-hmm. And having that knowledge is so important.
Yeah.
And decision makers, especially women, need to be in the room when some of these products and services are being created, because we just miss out on stuff and we forget about women in everything that's being built, which is a problem.
In the world we live in today, to even have the technical knowledge already sets you apart, right? It gives you the ability to become a decision maker, to have a say in something if you understand it.
Exactly.
So that's, really great.
Let's go into the culture thing you mentioned. The culture as you experienced it then wasn't up to scratch. What about that are you looking to change, and what's your perfect idyllic vision for tech culture?
It's a good question. I think the culture really alienates someone like me. I don't drink. I actually don't really like pizza. Sorry, everyone.
Oh,
yeah.
I can get on with not drinking, but pizza.
I'm Italian.
Oh, no.
Oh, sorry. Good pizza. I like good pizza. I don't like pizza from a takeaway shop at every event ever. I just think there was this big problem of being a very young woman. I was 19, 20 when I got into the scene, of this pressure of there being alcohol and pizza when I was at a stage where I was trying to be healthy and trying to look after myself. But more than that, I was also then the only woman, and then more than that, I was also the only Muslim woman, and then more than that, I was the only brown person, and all these things started to make me realise that the culture wasn't including me, and because it wasn't including me, I was the exception to the rule, which is why there weren't other people like me in the room. So when I talk about my ideal culture, I look for places that have me as a focus, and I don't mean me, I'm using me as an example, but I mean when they think about others. So can you get into the room? Is it accessible? Can you go in a wheelchair? Can you get in without a lift if you're claustrophobic? All those little things. Are there alternatives? Are there alternatives? Drinks and food. Is there a place to go and pray? Is there a place to go and break away if you have the need to? We forget that there's a lot of people in tech with disabilities and things that mean they need some quiet space. And also, I think one of the big things about the culture is that it's always focused on someone telling you stuff. And actually, one of the great things about tech and the whole open source sort of stuff shows you that tech is collaborative. So I guess my dream culture is a place where we are collaborative, where it is inclusive, and where it's accessible.
So actually the focus for you isn't just what your company's based on, which is diversifying the people actually involved in tech, but also diversifying the support system around it. So it's not just making sure there are a range of people from different cultures in the room, but making sure that, you know, people who can't eat pork have other options apart from pepperoni pizza, and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Right, so that's an amazing message. You're trying to build a whole movement basically from the ground up, and you're starting from 23 Code Street, right?
Yes.
Can you explain how the school works, how the program works, and give us an outline a little bit about how you built the whole idea?
So our vision is to have more women empowered with the tools to build the future, whether that means the technical skills, but also the understanding to make decisions, and to be in the room to affect change, so to speak. And I guess our vision, although we started as a coding school, is to be more than that at some point, which is to be a place where we can create technology, whether that means we are teaching the skills or building it ourselves, where we can fund people building stuff that we're excited about, and where we can speed up the process of getting talent or networks or knowledge. I think we all believe in the team that coding is the beginning for us, but technology as a whole, and I guess that's why we love culture so much, is we see how important that is to stick all those little bits together. And it won't be for a while, but we are definitely in it for the long haul, and we're here to definitely make change and affect change, and not just in London either. London-centric is such a big problem. Obviously, we have a one-for-one model, so that we work also in Mumbai, which I know we'll talk about in a minute. Mm-hmm. But one of the big problems that we have is that we focus all our resources on funding talent in London. But actually, there are so many smart people. Like, I was brought up in Nottingham for sort of my GCSE years, and I wish we had something like this up there. And I think actually that should be us. Like, we should be doing that. There's more money in London, it's why we all flock here. But if we're going to really achieve a bigger pool of talent, which is what we so desperately need, we need more female developers, and developers full stop. We need to be looking outside of this wonderful and amazing but definite bubble that we have.
Oh,
yeah,
and also
absolutely.
developers are in a great position to work remotely, so I mean, location really shouldn't matter.
Exactly. I mean, my dream is to go work on a beach. I mean,
whose isn't?
like,
the dream.
Let's all do it, but we can all do it, and at some point I think we'll start seeing that be a more realistic ambition and goal.
Yeah, absolutely. So how does 23 Code Street work? If you're interested in, applying or whatever, what's the process, and how did you envision the course itself?
So the process is very simple. We take people who just tell us they have an interest. It's first come, first serve. There's no technical test. We want people to come in because they want to come in. We just ask for an interest and a commitment to the 12 weeks. So all our courses are part-time. So it's for people who have full-time jobs, other commitments such as children, or other commitments such as health, which is always a big thing that gets forgotten. And we created the courses so that they were inclusive. So what I mean by that is that we all work in a class. So currently all the courses are in person, although that is changing. So that you had 2 people in a room with a small group of about 12 to 14 students, so that you could really work on learning and really ask those important questions and really find what you were struggling with and what you were good at. So the course is built around 3 main languages, so HTML, CSS and JavaScript, but also then we focus a lot on teaching accessibility and the latest in the industry. So we work with a lot of partners to really make sure we are at the cutting edge of what's going on in accessibility. We have a big problem with developers thinking they should just build quickly, but we're not building necessarily for everyone. And so that's a big focus of our curriculum. We also make sure that there's enough for people to do at home. So not everyone can or has the ability to work at home. But for those that do, there's support, there's Slack. We're always on Slack. No one sleeps. There's a place to go back to if they need the help.
What do you mean by accessibility in the code?
Yeah, sure. So we mean things like, are the color contrasts correct on the website or app that you are building? Is the sizing structure right? Do you have alternative text? All the sort of things that mean someone with a screen reader can use it, or someone who is hard of hearing or seeing can use the applications that you're building. We tend to build for people that look like us. What I mean is are like us, but actually there's such a big market for people who aren't like us, and we need to be making sure we build for them too.
Mm-hmm.
So you're inclusive in your spirit and in your code.
We have to be, right?
Yeah.
It's the only way to make sure more people are involved in what's going on.
That's very exciting. In your opinion, just in a nutshell, what makes for a good developer?
I think developers who come from other industries and have other skills are great developers because they have a background of understanding something else. So like a physicist who comes in and learns how to code, or we had this amazing woman who I met once who was an artist, and she was like, I want to learn because I want to see if the way my brain works affects the code that I build. And it's like, wow, that's incredible. And I think it's so true. We need more people who are hybrids.
Yeah, I think that's true of every industry now.
Yeah.
Interdisciplinarity is such a great strength.
Yeah.
Because it allows you, like, diversity, to think outside the box, to think outside the parameters that have been set by industry standards, and that, you know, fosters creativity and brilliance.
Exactly. And I think companies need to be training people, right? Those people that are brilliant in their bits, let's give them that knowledge. Or people who are doing masters at places like Oxford who are so smart, or who have these incredible ideas around sustainability and stuff, don't maybe necessarily have the skills to build it. We should be definitely grouping those people together. So yeah, you're totally right.
And of course you were saying that it's so easy to build for people like us, and so in order to build for, you know, our broad diverse society, you need broad and diverse developers who can identify with, if you had a diverse enough team, you have enough people to identify with you know, all the weird and wonderful people in our society. So having empathy and soft skills, as you said, is important for actually making products that people will actually be happy to use, because, you know, either maybe they're visually impaired and so they know what the experience is like, or maybe they're a physicist and understand what physicists needs, like not just who a person is, but what a person knows allows them to build for someone else out there, because you don't just build tech for techies.
Exactly. Exactly.
So at the end of the course, how long is the course?
12 weeks.
So at the end of the 12 weeks, what have you seen people come away with? What's been the feedback? Have they changed careers? How has it impacted these women?
It's a good question. It varies a lot. A lot of our students do an internship with one of our partners, which is great, and I think it's a really good experience for them. We've had some career changes who are becoming developers. We've had an amazing woman called Ikra who believes in political activism, who is using coding to change how she gets her message out, which is just amazing. And she was on the BBC the other day, and I think what it has allowed a lot of people to do is to push themselves into that next step. We had a mum who did the course who's teaching her 2 daughters as well, and it's so great to see how different those stories are. And people always say to me, what are your numbers? What are your stats? I'm like, I don't care. I don't care enough to tell you how many of our students became developers, because I'd rather tell you their stories. And I'd rather tell you why they did it and what they gained out of it and what they're becoming.
So we've mentioned earlier that you're running a 1-for-1 scheme. What does that mean?
We run a coding school here which funds teaching digital skills in Mumbai. So we work in the slums with women who have been through a hell of a lot. So we work with partner NGOs who work already on the ground. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're not starting our own centre. That's not what we're here to do. We're here to give all those NGOs that are running amazing things an extra feather in their cap. And that for us is digital skills. So from very basic, how do laptops work, how do I type, how do we use Excel, data entry, to as time goes on, we obviously hope to introduce some basic stuff. So a bit of HTML, a bit of CSS. So they've got something that gives them an edge and to earn a little bit of extra money. So we currently have been helping build a computer centre in one of the NGOs, which has been amazing to see. We're working with this woman who was born in the slum and who has now created a school in the slum. So they're slightly younger, so they're the only ones we would talk about publicly. We can't talk about the older women we work with due to the risk we put them in if we do that, and the risk we put the NGO in. It's a very difficult space to be working in when a lot of the women have run away from home and a lot of the women are being searched for. A lot of the women are ex-trafficked women who have been rescued or who have managed to escape. So we don't name our NGOs, but we sometimes tell the stories of the women we have worked with.
Could you give us a little bit of insight into why you chose to run this parallel scheme? Because, I mean, as we mentioned earlier, there are lots and lots of coding schools in London, but this makes yours stand out.
Thank you. The listeners can't see this, but I'm brown. My mum's Indian and my dad's white, and they moved us out to India when I was 14, no, but younger, maybe 13. We lived there for a couple of years. And on our first week, we were walking down the street, and this young girl who looked literally my age was carrying a little baby who was literally the age of my sister, and she asked me for my ice cream. And I had been a spoiled brat about getting this ice cream. And I was like, okay, you have my ice cream. And I just cried about it for like the next 24 hours, basically. And my mum just said this thing, which was, don't cry about it, do something about it. And as kind of the years went on and I got older, I always knew that India would be the place I'd go back to, because there is so much work that needs to be done to close the gap that we currently have in India from this extremely rich, overly privileged class to this extremely poor, have nothing, get overlooked. And it's almost like their God-given punishment to be poor. Is how it's seen. That's not how I see it. Let's just be clear. The caste system is obviously a huge issue in India too, and there's this rising middle class. But with this rising middle class, there's also this want to do more and to change more. And I guess that rising middle class is where I would put myself if I was to live in India, because I also see what's going on below and I can see what's going on above. And I've always known that I wanted to change something. And I have a massive issue with, and I put this in the nicest possible way, poverty tourism. People who go out and work in the slums for 2 or 3 months, they teach, and then they disappear. Because actually it's more beneficial for the people who are going out there, because they're gaining this life-changing experience working in the slum. But really
Finding yourself.
And I'm not saying that what they're doing is wrong, and I understand the want and the need to help. I feel that every day myself. But I think when we want to make true change, we need it to be sustainable. And we need brown teachers in India. We need black teachers in parts of like East Africa where my mum was born. We need people who look like the people they're teaching to teach, so they don't feel like they're trapped, that they can become that teacher, and then the teacher can become something else. And that's what we hope to do, is that we're training local teachers who train the students who one day will become teachers themselves. And if we one day close down, go bankrupt or whatever it is, there's still something there that doesn't need us.
Right, so it reflects the model that you've set up here. It's empowering people to become something, to be able to have the tools to, elevate themselves beyond what they're used to or whatever situation they're in.
Exactly, and it's an alternative career as well. Like, women obviously work in India, as they do here, and it's always very traditional roles for the poorer women. It's cleaning, the cooking for people in the houses, it's doing laundry in these big outdoor places, very stereotyped jobs. Giving them something like data entry, where they can do it from the safe space of an IT centre or possibly from an office, if that is something that a business can do, it changes things. It changes the class of that person and how the community views that person. And empowering women in a very matriarchal society like India, although that's a bit of an oxymoron, it changes how people view women, and that's just as important. It's a big culture change too. And India is matriarchal in one way, in so much as the culture around India is built around goddesses, and it's built around cows, especially in Hindu culture. Obviously, it's very different in the Islamic side and the Sikh side. But there is a respect for women that I feel has been lost over the years. But when we bring in new things such as education, I think that stuff starts to change because they start to be seen as something more.
So the difference between your efforts there is that, and sort of the poverty tourism types, you think they're making a change, is that you're creating lasting change, whereas the other organisations aren't trying to do wrong, but it is perhaps just short-sighted. I see. How were the beginnings? Did you go over there and teach someone there and then set them up with, a schoolroom? Or how did you initiate that process of, teachers teaching students who'll become teachers, and that will hopefully be a self-perpetuating journey?
Yeah, we're still very early days in India because it takes long for all sorts of reasons. But we went out, worked with an NGO who already had an IT room of some description and a centre that we could help fund and build a bit better. We worked with their teachers that they had to teach them the digital side and implemented that as a first step. It sounds tiny, but it takes so long because English is not the first language for a lot of the women we're working with, and every little thing you do and you try and test, you have to do it really slowly and start again, and then do it really slowly and start again. So we found the first person we worked with through the local IT university, which was amazing, and he's incredible. And then we found others through the NGO partners. And I think the way we initiated it was just to meet every NGO that said to us, we're trying to do something more for the women we work with. And we went to some of the hardest NGOs. And when I say hardest, I mean places that a lot of people overlook. Because a lot of times they work with children, right? You go and try and do something helpful. Everyone works with children. And a lot of women who are aging, oh, that's a horrible word. I mean, there's people my age as well, but are sort of left to think, that's it, you're not going to do anything else. So that was our first thing. Go and recce all the NGOs, find people we liked that we wanted to work with, find teachers through local IT centres and communities, and also hook into the local startup scene. The startup scene in Mumbai is incredible, and actually, because a lot of them are run by the local, rising middle class again, they want to give back. And a lot of them are helping with curriculum and stuff too. But like I say, it's only been a year and a half and we've already done so much, but it's slow.
I wonder if there's any difference you have seen or hope to see in female developers in the workspace. I mean, so you're saying there weren't enough, but is there any difference between the presence of a woman in a team, the presence of a man? And do you think there's any natural biological difference between a woman's approach and a man's approach?
It's a good question, and one I make sure I steer very far away from because it very much depends on the person. It's very easy to generalise and say women are empathetic, men are cold, and I've worked for the most amazing man who is the most sympathetic, empathetic man who changed the culture of the workplace I've worked in. I have worked with a woman who I wanted to murder. And I think it's really interesting that one of the arguments to get more women in companies and in jobs is this idea that women approach things differently to men. And I don't think it's biological. I think it's societal. I think we are brought up in ways that are different to men, and that has created a different approach. So not biological, no, but societally and the way we've been brought up in society, I definitely do think there are things that have made the majority of women slightly different to men in the way approaches happen. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing either. In fact, I think we need to teach more men to be not okay. I think we need to teach more men to say, I'm having mental health problems. I think we need to teach more men to be able to actually say, okay, I understand how you're feeling today and I totally sympathize with you. Take the day off. And you see a lot of those traits in females, like women bosses especially, where those things do happen. Or the complete opposite, where women who are bosses go the complete opposite way and become colder because they feel this need to prove themselves. So I think we have a real issue as society on how we are bringing up men versus women rather than biological differences.
Mm-hmm. So the natural character thing aside, a great advantage of bringing more women into the workplace is that their experience will have been very different. We've been brought up differently and offer different perspectives, if not necessarily different characters.
Yeah, and we have different needs. Like, biologically, we have different needs. We have periods for the majority of our life that is something that Apple Health forgot about when they built their first version, like, because their team was mostly male, and we've had things where seatbelts have created which have crushed women because they've forgotten we have boobs. Like, biologically, we are built differently. And those needs, I think, really do affect products. And I think they really do affect the way we approach services because we know the things that we need. And I think we forget a lot about older women, especially with menopause, and the effect that that has on the workplace and the effect that that has on depression and your self-belief. You start to lose your hair, you start to lose your youth and the elasticity in your skin. And all these things don't sound related, but they are, because they're related to how we see ourselves in a workplace. And I think that's why diversity is really important, because a different experience is a shared experience, and we need to start seeing more of that. And we need to start hiring more older women. It's ridiculous. And younger women. But we do need some more older women across the board, because their experience is just invaluable.
And like you were saying, if we do so much work in trying to improve, society in the future, we're focusing on the children and the older people, both in India and here in London, perhaps like housewives who've brought up children and feel like they're no longer relevant to society. Without them, we're doing a disservice to the name of social enterprise, because the children you might teach will go home to parents who are disenfranchised with the system. Exactly,
100%. And mums are so incredibly talented just from the experience of bringing up children.
So just to sort of wrap things up a little bit, what would your advice be to someone who is, thinking about code but perhaps hesitant about it, or maybe, like you said, doesn't necessarily want a career in it, but wants to understand what's happening around them in the world, because so much of it is about code, like...
Tech is everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah, join a 23 Code Street course. No, my serious advice would be to learn in some way about the small things around you. And if you find those things interest you, start to learn a bit more and a bit more until you realise how much you actually genuinely love it. Or hate it, that's possible. But having that little bit of understanding. There's an incredible blog called What is Code by Paul Ford, which he wrote for Bloomberg. It's incredible, Google it, it's wonderfully interactive. But understanding just how your mobile phone works, or how when you type on a keyboard and you press the letter A and the letter A appears on Word, like how that works, I think is just a mind-blowing, eye-opening piece of knowledge. And I think it's important to know that, because we're doing that stuff every day.
Well, thank you so much for
all
of your incredible insights and for sharing what 23 Code Street does. Best of luck. We'll hope to see more from you soon in expanding in India and whatnot. And yeah, best of luck.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you so much to Rise for hosting us. We use their podcast studio here in their building near Old Street, and it's fantastic. If you would like to get in touch with the team at Charge, you can contact us on Twitter. Our username is develop_team, and we use the hashtag #ChargePodcast, or you can email us at charge@develop.co.uk. Thanks for listening in, and we'll catch you in a couple of weeks.
Bye.
Bye.